This video reviews the skills taught in the Spreadsheets The Basics lesson in SMS 202. Let's begin by creating a new spreadsheet file. And we'll begin by entering and editing data in cells. So let's review the concept of a spreadsheet. A spreadsheet is a series of columns and rows that intersect to create cells. And every cell has a name, starting with the column it's in, followed by the row that it's in. So for example, right now I am displaying cell D8. So with your mouse, select a cell, click the left mouse button, for example in cell A6, and start typing. You can type words, numbers, dates, formulas, functions into a cell. So we'll type name, followed by sales, followed by sales commission. And then underneath name, we'll add a couple of names, some simple names that are short and easy to type, and some sales. And we'll add a total. Average, max, min, count. Now, most of the time when you're working with spreadsheet data, you need to calculate with numbers. So let's begin there. Let's add up the sales for Sam, Bill, and Tom in column B, and we'll put the answer into cell B10. Now, you could do it a couple of different ways, but only one way is the right way. But you need to know that to do any calculations in a spreadsheet, you always begin by typing an equal sign. And as soon as you do that, your keyboard becomes a calculator. So your keypad now works like a calculator would. So you could simply type 1000 plus 500 plus 250 and press enter, and you will get the right answer. Clearly that's not the right way to do it, because what if you had 1,000 people on your list? Then it would be very time consuming to enter 1,000 numbers at the keypad. The other problem is this. If I change Sam's sales to 500, note that the total in B10 didn't change. And so I would then have to go into my total and change the 1,000 to 500. That is very, very inefficient and totally the wrong way to do it. So let's delete by pressing the delete key at the keyboard, and let's start again. This time I start with an equal sign, and instead of typing the number, I click on the cell that contains the number, plus, and then the other cell, B8, plus B9. I get the same answer, or I get the right answer, and now it doesn't matter what the numbers are in the cells. The numbers in the cells can change, and the formula will always give you the correct answer. So this is a much better way of doing it. But again, there's the problem of what if you had 1,000 people on the list? You would then have to click on 1,000 cells, and that's not efficient. So the right way to add up a group or a range of cells is by going into the Home tab and clicking on this icon called Auto Sum. It's in the editing group. And when you click on it, you'll see there's a dotted line. And that means that Excel is guessing the range or the group of cells that you want to add up. If it's correct, press enter, or with your mouse, click on the check mark in the formula bar. And that's the right way to add up a range or group of cells. If we want to quickly calculate the average sales for these three people, this time we'll click on the drop-down arrow next to the auto sum icon and select from the list average. Again, Excel is guessing which cells you want to average, but this time it is guessing wrong. So we need to reselect only the 3 numbers related to Sam, Bill, and Tom. We don't want to average the total. We can also use another similar shortcut function called max. Max function selects the highest number from a range of cells. In this case, we would expect the answer to be 1000. And the min function will display the smallest number in a range of cells. And we would expect that to be 250. And count is a function that counts cells that contains numbers. So there are 3 numbers related to the 3 people on our list. Now let's do another type of calculation in the form of a formula. And remember, every formula begins with an equal sign. And every formula should reference cell addresses where appropriate. So for example, let's calculate a 10% commission for each salesperson. So we'll take the number in B7 and multiply that, and that's using the star, by 10%. I'm going to enter the number 10% directly inside the formula because I don't see it anywhere else on my spreadsheet at this time. And that is the correct result. So 10% of 1000 is 100. Now I could repeat the process 2 more times for Bill or Tom, or I can select the original formula and copy it for Bill and Tom. And the shortcut for copy is to place your mouse cursor on the corner, on the bottom right corner, and you see it changes shape into a crosshair. Click and drag down. And that is a shortcut for copying anything from one cell directly down to another cell or directly across to a different column. And let's have a look to see what actually happened. When we click on the Formulas ribbon and click Show Formulas, we can now see the formulas or the functions that have been entered into the cells. And we can see that what happened was B7 times 10%, when it was copied down, changed to B8 times 10%, changed to B9 times 10%. And this concept is called relative cell addressing. The cell address in a formula or a function changes relative to where you are copying it to. So if you're copying a formula or function down, then the row number of the cell addresses will change. And if you copy formulas or functions across, then the column heading of each cell address will change accordingly. And again, that's called relative cell addressing, and Excel does this automatically without you doing anything else. Now, let's go back to our original spreadsheet by removing the show formulas. And my next concern is, what if I want to change the sales commission to something other than 10%? Let's change it to 5%. Well, that's kind of difficult to do because now we have to hunt for where is that 10%, and we have to change it in every single formula and function that uses that 10%. So what we'd like to do is actually enter that 10% at the top of the worksheet and enter a label so we know what that 10% is. So that will be sales comm rate. And don't worry about the fact that our label's been cut off. We'll fix that problem a little bit later. Now I'm going to edit Sam's sales commission formula. And I did that by double clicking into cell C7. Now I'm going to remove backspace over the 10% and replace that with a reference to cell C4, because now that 10% is found in cell C4. That doesn't change Sam's commission calculation. Now I will copy Sam's sales commission down for Bill and Tom, and oops, clearly there's a problem. And how come this time the copy command didn't work? Well, let me show you. Let's display the formulas again. Remember the concept of relative cell addressing. When we copy a formula or a function down or across, the cell addresses automatically change. Well, in this case, we want the B7 to change to B8 to change to B9. That part we want. But what we don't want to change is the C4. We always want to multiply by the value in cell C4. So what we need to do is put a $sign in front of the row number. Why? Because it's the row number that changes when we copy up and down. And by doing this, we are making a relative cell address into an absolute cell address. And please don't confuse this $sign with a currency symbol. It has nothing to do with that. By putting a $sign in front of the 4, look what happens now when we copy the sales commission formula down for Bill and Tom. Notice how the reference to cell C4 doesn't change, and that's exactly what we want. Now it's very easy to change that 10% to any percentage that we want, and Excel automatically recalculates all the formulas and all the functions that reference that number in cell C4. That is called proper spreadsheet design. There is another similar way of getting the same result, and let me show you. Before we recreate a sales commission formula, I'm selecting cell C4, and then I'm going to click here in the name box, and I'm going to type a word to represent the number that's in cell C4. So I'll just call that COMM for short for commission. And then I'll press enter to finish. So now every time I land on cell C4, the name box will show me the word name that represents that cell. Now, why do I do that? I do that so that now I can use that name directly in a formula. So I'll take B7 times com and press enter. So I get the same result as I had in column C. And when I copy down this formula for Bill and Tom, you'll notice that the word com doesn't change. It acts as if it is an absolute cell reference. So those are two different ways of getting the same result, and both methods are equally valid. Now let me show you how to insert columns and rows and adjust column widths. Let's insert a column to the left of column A, and there are several ways of doing it. Method number 1 is to select any cell in column A, and from the home ribbon, click on the down arrow next to Insert and select Insert Sheet Columns. Now I will undo what I just did and show you another way of doing it. My preferred way is called the shortcut way, or the right-click method. I'm going to move my mouse cursor directly on column A and right-click and then select from the shortcut menu that appears. So I will select Insert and immediately a column to the left is immediately inserted. Now I'm going to use an autofill feature to number the people on the list. Now, clearly there are only 3 people. It's easy just to type 1, 2, 3. But Excel has this feature that if you start with the first 2 numbers in a series and then select both of them, you can move your mouse over that little fill handle on the bottom right side, click and drag, and Excel continues the series that you began with the first 2 numbers. So that improves the speed of your data input. If I want to make the column narrower, since I don't need it to be as wide as it is, again, there are multiple ways of doing it. One way is through the ribbon, through the home ribbon. Next, format, column width, and then you can decide exactly how wide you want your columns to be. So for example, I could just select 2 to make it 2 characters wide. And the other way is to simply position your mouse cursor between the A and the B at the top, and notice it becomes an arrow in the middle. Click and drag, and I can adjust however I wish to adjust the column widths. Next, I'll show you how to format cells. And formatting cells is simply applying formatting features to make the numbers and the words look better than they are. So we'll start by using some formatting on the title here in cell. I'm going to select the title in B1 and then also select C1, D1, E1, F1. And I'm going to apply a command from the home ribbon called merge and center. So what Excel will do, it will merge the cells into one big cell and then center the text that was in cell B1. And that nicely creates a title that's centered over your worksheet calculations. And now we can use all the buttons here in the home ribbon font group to change the way the text appears. We can change the font style to something else. We can change the font size to make it smaller or bigger. We can bold the text or italicize it. We can underline it, single or double. We can add a border to the cells, maybe a thick box border that goes all the way around the merged cell. We can change the fill color, which is the color behind the text. We can change the font color from black to, let's do purple. And we can do the same for all the other text if we choose to do so. In cell C4, we will apply something called wrap text. So if I don't want to make column C wider than it is now, wrap text makes the row higher than it is now, and it wraps the text around. So now I'm going to right align the text, push it to the right side of the cell so it lines up nicer with the numbers below. I'll do the same. I'll right align the word sales. And for sales commission, since both columns are sales commission, I will again apply merge and center to those 2 cells. Now with the numbers, I'm going to select all the numbers except the count numbers, and I will apply a counting number format, which automatically adds a currency symbol, a comma, and 2 decimal places to all the numbers. And if I don't want to see the decimal places, now I can decrease them so as not to display them. I can also, for example, take the formatting that's, for example, in cell B6, click on this paintbrush called Format Painter. That attaches a paintbrush to the mouse cursor, and I'm going to paint the remaining cells with the same format. So Format Painter applies the formatting from one cell and puts it into one or more other cells. And again, it greatly speeds up your work. And if you wish to remove cell formatting, then you can select one or more cells, and from the Home tab, click on the icon called Clear and select Clear Formats. That removes all the formatting, but without deleting any text or numbers that were in the cells before. Now let me show you how to delete a row, for example. Let's delete row 3, we don't need it. Again, I'll show you the shortcut method. Position your mouse cursor on the 3, right click to get a shortcut menu and select delete. And that is a much faster way of deleting a row than, let me show you the longer way, I'll undo, where I select row 3, click on row 3, and then from the Home ribbon, I click next to delete sheet rows. And you'll notice that all the row numbers are renumbered, and you'll also notice that when you insert columns, rows, if you delete column rows, you don't have to worry about your formulas or functions. All the cell addresses inside your formulas and functions automatically change based on what you're doing, if you're inserting or deleting. So you never have to worry about that. Now I wish to go over the concept of multiple worksheets. You'll see here at the bottom, every time you open or create a new spreadsheet file, there is one sheet that's visible. But right next to the one sheet is a plus sign that allows you to insert more sheets, 2, 3, 4. How many? Well, it all depends on how much data you have on each sheet. But the basic rule is your Excel file, all the worksheets in total, cannot have more data in it, cannot have a file size that is bigger than the RAM memory of your computer, because the entire file, when opened, has to be able to fit into the RAM memory of your computer. So you could have one huge worksheet, because remember, every worksheet has about 1 million rows and about 250,000 columns. Or it could have less data in thousands of individual worksheets. To rename a worksheet tab, you double click on it and you can type something that's more representative of what it is that you are doing. And before we end this in-class practice exercise, I want to show you how to create a basic chart. Before you go into the ribbon to insert a chart, you have to select what it is you want to chart. I'll give you 2 examples. So I'm going to select name, sales, and the sales for the first 3 names on my list. So notice I'm not just selecting the numbers, I'm also selecting the column headings and the row headings that apply, that describe those numbers. That's important. Once I've selected what it is I want to graph or chart, I click on the Insert tab and I click on Recommended Charts, and we'll see what Excel has to say. So based on what you've selected, Excel will give you some recommendations as to the type of chart that would work with the data that you've selected. So you can just select whichever one you want, click OK, and you'll notice that the chart is an object that floats on top of your spreadsheet, and you can resize it by clicking and dragging on the nodes, and you can position it somewhere else. Now, what if you wanted to create a graph that shows the sales commissions, not the sales? So this time we're going to select the names and then hold down the control key at the keyboard, and while you're holding down the control key, then you will select the sales commissions in column D and then release the control key. So what you've done is you've selected non-adjacent ranges, and now you can continue to insert a recommended chart, and perhaps this time we can make it into a bar chart, or even a pie chart. And again, it floats, it's an object that floats on top, and you can resize it and you can move it around. You will learn how to edit charts to make them look exactly like you want them to in a future lesson called Advanced Formatting and Chart Editing. Well, we're almost done, but before we save, let's set up for printing. Now, I know you don't need to print any of your assignments for this course, but in real life, you still will have to print. So let's adjust some basic print settings. And before we do that, I want to insert a header or a footer by clicking in the text group and selecting header and footer. And in the header, there are three parts, middle, left, and right. And you can type your name, or you can select from the buttons here in the header and footer elements group. So I can type page number on the left side. In the middle, I can do current date, and on the right side, perhaps the name of the file. And how do I get back to the normal view? I select any cell outside of the header, and I go to View, Normal. I go back to the normal view. Headers and footers only appear in page layout view and in print preview. Otherwise, you don't see it. Let's go to page layout. We might want to change the orientation to landscape. And we might want to change the margins, which are the white space all the way around. And we can customize that to make that anything that we want. And here under width and height, we can say that we want everything to fit on 1 page wide and 1 page tall. Now, when we go to the backstage, which is the File menu, and we click on Print, Excel will show us exactly how our worksheet will look when it's printed. And you'll notice that it's designed to scale to fit sheet on 1 page. It's done on landscape orientation, and that the entire worksheet by default has been selected for printing. And the last thing we're going to do while we're here in the backstage is Save As. And Save As allows us to select a save location as well as a name. If the name is different from what we're starting with, the Save As command allows us to select a different location and allows us to select a different name. And that's about it. If you get stuck, there's always the little question mark on the top right side of every Excel window, which takes you to Microsoft Excel Help. But you have to be connected to the internet in order to get that additional help. And that's the end of the Spreadsheets, the Basics in Class Practice exercise.